Hi, everyone. I'm Raleigh, and I'd like to welcome you all to our live Q&A today. I'm here with Alta, Nosi, Steve, Moka, Vasco, Joseph, and Michaela, who you all probably already know from the Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities panel earlier today. Thanks for coming back, everyone, to take some questions from our audience. So over the past hour or so, the GR for Good community has been watching and asking some great questions for you all. We're really excited to answer these questions. If you're watching and you still have more questions, it's not too late. You can submit your questions right below the video. So with that, let's start out. One thing that I was really impressed by after hearing from all of you on the panel is really hearing from you how important it is that when these mapping projects happen, it's not just about consulting Indigenous and local communities or engaging with them, but how critical it is that the communities themselves are really holding the pen or the ones driving Google Earth and really in the driver's seat. And so maybe Michaela, I'll start with you, but I'm just curious if you could, talk a little bit more about why it's so important that the community members themselves are really driving this map making.
Awesome. Thank you, Raleigh. So it's really important for communities to, possess the information that they're generating about themselves for themselves, because oftentimes they get mapped out of, maps where territories are erased, and that's because there's probably some political intentions behind that, why they're not being captured in that particular map. And also on the other side, they're probably mapping some really important data related to areas that they want to protect, or areas that they're foraging or gathering different medicinal herbs, which then could be translated for generations to come. And so we're very visual learners when it comes to our ability to sort of learn and understand like our landscapes a little bit better. And maps definitely help us do that. And so it's really critical for us to be able to author our own maps and, become the experts in those map making skills, because it's critical for, just the salvation of our peoples, but then also to keep that knowledge to ourselves.
Thank you, Michaela. Thanks. So we have another question from the audience. This question actually is for Andrew from Lil. And Andrew wasn't able to join us on the panel today because of this being not a great time for Australia. But I'm going to ask it anyways. So Lil says, "Kia ora, everyone. Being remote, no reception, and rural is challenging in some of the places we live in our mapping. And I'm interested to know what people are using in terms of on-site field monitoring tools such as ODK and which ones they found are most effective and easy to use with communities." And she asked a bit about Fulcrum, which I know is quite a popular tool in Australia. Maybe we'll try to get Andrew to address that later in writing. But maybe Nosi, if I could kind of toss this question to you. I know that ODK was a huge part of your mapping work alongside Google Earth with the TITSA project. And I'm curious if you can kind of tell us a little bit more about how you used ODK with Google Earth and with the communities.
Okay, I'll try my best. So for us, ODK is working better when there's no connectivity, because you can still get an accurate geolocation point and collect your data without losing the information on the form. And then you just save that on your device that you're using, whether it's a tablet or your phone. And then when you do have connectivity, so you sort of have to know a spot where there's better connectivity, and then you can send the form, and then it will be on the online database. Otherwise, we also have people that go out into the field that link up with those people that have those forms on their phones, in case they didn't have data at all, because sometimes that's unpredictable, connectivity that is. Then that person just download those forms directly onto a computer, and it doesn't need any network. And then those forms are then saved and stored in a safe place. So that's how we use it. We don't directly use the ODK platform to map, because it is mostly used in our case to collect data about suspended sediment in our catchment, so in our tributaries. So yeah, that's how we use it.
Wonderful. And a kind of related comment from Robin A in the Q&A, who says, Google Earth Pro is great for my project because it can be used when you're in remote areas and have no internet connection. And so, Steve, actually, I was wondering if you could comment a little bit more on how you use Google Earth Pro, in remote communities where there is no internet connection. I know, Firelight, and I know others on the panel have a lot of experience with this, but Steve, could you kind of add anything about that?
Yeah, so what we've found is a really good way to work in a remote setting is that you can download the cache. You can pre-fly your area of interest that you might be doing mapping in. And what we typically do is we try to understand, okay, where is the study area that we're going to be focusing on? And then we build a number of paths that cover the entire study area that we want to focus on. And we'll clear the cache out of Google Earth, and then we'll set the settings so that we can maximize the amount of cache that gets stored on your laptop of the imagery, maximize the amount of RAM, and then we literally press play, and we create a folder called the paths in a folder, and then we press play, and it literally flies across those paths, and it goes in order from one path to the next. And you can preset the flight speed depending on what your internet connection is. And what it does allow you to do is be able to then gather that area of interest imagery, close your laptop, go to the community where there's no internet, open up your laptop, and be able to then do the mapping in that area where you might not have internet. So that's a feature that we've managed to work around without having the internet connection, and that seems to work really, really well for us, because then we can still have that really rich imagery, have a really nice picture to work on, and then still carry out the mapping and putting the place marks, paths, and polygons onto the map.
Amazing. Thank you, Steve. So now we have another question from the Q&A from David A. And Moka, I might direct this to you. So David wants to know, when you're doing this type of mapping work, has it been done in a large kind of public meeting setting? And if so, how does your process change from when you're, talking to a single person in an interview, very intimate, to trying to do this mapping work kind of in a large, more public meeting setting?
It's a lot of fun, to be honest. Well, it can be quite stressful. Generally, you'll have a facilitator. So in a collective setting, you're still set up similar to what Steve's done in a direct-to-digital process. You just have someone at the front facilitating that process, and you just got community engagement. So the community collectively agrees around what those places are that you're identifying, what you want to look at doing, how do you want to visualize the different sites, what do you want to put on a map. So rather than an individual interview where you're actually mapping each individual point, when you've got collective engagement and you're in a large setting, you're pretty much validating that process straight there, and you can go through. So when we've done kids engagement, all the kids have been able to go out, collect the sites, put them up onto a map, and then they've been able to arrange them, and it just takes a little bit more time, but it's actually quite rewarding when you're doing that.
Amazing, thank you. So then we have a comment from Scott H in the Q&A, who wants to ask Steve, will Isabel be the moderator for the Geo for Good Summit 2031? Survey says yes. I've been showing my daughters a lot of the functionality. So Steve, is Isabel going to be joining Firelight as a mapper?
I hope so. And if you watch the video, and I was as I was doing the video with her and the mapping with her, I noticed the change in her face, and I think we've all had that experience with Google Earth or with Google mapping tools, is that you look at the map and you find your house. In that case, she found her cabin, and she was able to what it did was it opened up this whole world that she knew of that place and all these memories, and you could actually see it on her face, which was really exciting. And so I hope that's inspired her to become a mapper. I'd love, for her to walk in my footsteps, which would be fun, and then run way past me. And yeah, she's phenomenal. So hopefully she's at a future Geo for Good.
Amazing. On a similar note, Joseph, I actually wanted to ask you, because a lot of the projects you talked about were really about engaging the younger generation in their culture, in history, in the mapping work. And I'm just curious if you could say a little bit more about how maps can be helpful with that intergenerational knowledge transfer.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think that's been so beneficial for us when we're making maps is to take information and have the students and our youth be involved in not only utilizing the information, but being a part of putting extra stuff on there. And some of the programs that we do, like the Remember the Removal Ride, having that, allowing extra editors and people to stick on there, is we allow the students to add additional information and content. And so you find really historical events that the students are learning throughout the 6 months before the training, and they're able to allow that on there. And so when we geolocate that stuff and we actually travel to those sites, they can read about these historical events that others have put on and that they've put on. And it really makes that location stuff exciting that they've been involved in. So, and it's easy tools to use. That's the thing that's really nice, is it's a low bar of skill set, but a high delivery of ability of putting content in for a community person. So it's been really beneficial for our programs.
Thank you, Joseph. So we have another question for Vasco from Tanya. Tanya says, yesterday the New York Times published an article exposing illegal land clearing of rainforest in Hundonia, and how not only beef goes to China, but hides go to car seats in American luxury vehicles. Companies claim they don't contribute to deforestation, but they don't have a complete picture of their supply chains. How do you see technology helping here?
Hi, Tanya. That's a great article, and I really recommend anybody who can to read it. It was really well researched, really well done, and it shows some of the challenges that we have, or that everyone has, in being able to really track what's happening on the ground, and how what's happening on the ground impacts us, and how our consumer decisions affect what's happening in these regions. And so technology is actually really well placed as a really important tool for exactly these types of tracing tools. But it's really important to understand that it can't just be done with information from satellite. They're really important as a complement as well, but we really need to work with information from the ground. And that's where communities come in. That's where local people come in. It's the ability to use these tools, these inclusive tools, technology tools, such as ODK, the newly being developed ground, and other applications, so that they can provide the information that's necessary to really show the origin of these projects. And so there's some really great programs happening in the Amazon today. One of them is Origins, which actually tells the story of each rainforest product that comes out and the person who collected those seeds or those products. And then people can follow that from on the good side. And now on the other side, when you have products that come from illegality, it's really important that we are able to trace that, to understand where they come from and what's happening on the ground. And again, it's so important that this is done with community information and with the people who are actually there. The satellites, they provide a complement, and they're really important, but by themselves, they don't provide us enough information to really be able to do anything about it. So again, the involvement of the youth, the involvement of the communities who are actually there, getting to hear their voices of what's happening in these tools and what these tools provide, is really the key to making a difference there.
Thank you so much, Vasco. And I think we could have had an hour for this panel, because there's so many more questions from the audience we haven't even gotten a chance to get to yet, and haven't gotten a chance to get to all of our panelists. But I do have to wrap up, because the next session is going to be starting very soon. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists for sharing stories, engaging with communities to share stories with us, and recording those messages, and to our audience for watching. And so now we're going to be taking a short break. Next up is the accessibility panel, as well as the social inclusion lightning talks, and Michaela will be making another appearance there. So please stay tuned. Have a great summit.